UMAP, U-M-A-P. Not exactly the initials for Gulag, but the conditions in them were practically identical. You know, many dozens of men and boys, youths primarily, died, were beaten to death, and so forth. And like I say, they concentrated on youths. All cities and so forth have areas where gay people are known to congregate. Well, the Castro regime would surround these areas with military trucks. Soldiers will go out with machine guns and so forth and herd everyone in these areas into trucks and dump them in forced labor camps.
Not exactly Leisure World.
And the sign in the front of these camps as you walked in, it said, "Work will make men out of you." Which is interesting because Auschwitz had a big sign up front that said, "Work will set you free."
Now, Donald Trump is often likened to Hitler. Do you know who was a real fan of Hitler? Castro and Che.
Castro was always a keen student of a fascist and Nazi paraphernalia. Mussolini primarily because of his Latin heritage. But it's no coincidence among those of us who know Cuban history that Castro's most famous speech is titled, "History Will Absolve Me." He gave this speech and he wrote a book with that title back in 1953 when he was first arrested. Well, that also happens to be the most famous quote by Adolf Hitler after the beer hall putsch.
Now that raises the question, what causes this blind, almost willful ignorance of Che Guevara?
Bill de Blasio unleashed his inner revolutionary at a Miami labor rally, quoting a man who was apparently one of his longtime heroes, Cuban revolutionary El Comandante Che Guevara, Fidel Castro's right-hand man. Hasta la victoria siempre, always toward victory, was one of Che's most famous phrases, the subject of poems and songs.
So it's ignorance and the domination of our media that is fascinated with this romantic image of Che Guevara.
You want to think that ignorance accounts for a lot to it. But no, it's been 50 years. People have been saying and writing about these atrocities for 50 years. But what happened is that the left, the liberals, had a monopoly on the mainstream media, so it was difficult for these items to penetrate the mainstream media filter because we were bad-mouthing the left's premier poster boys, Fidel Castro and Che Guevara.
So, just how much blood is on the hands of Che Guevara? Humberto Fontana. The regime Che Guevara co-founded stole the savings and property of 6.4 million citizens, made refugees of 20% of the population. Che Guevara's regime also shattered through executions, jailings, mass larceny, and exile virtually every family on the island of Cuba. Many opponents of the Cuban regime qualify as the longest suffering political opponents in modern history, having suffered prison camps, forced labor, and torture chambers for a period 3 times as long in Che Guevara's Gulag as Russia's Alexander Solzhenitsyn suffered in Stalin's Gulag. End of quote. Oh, and Che Guevara's thoughts about blacks? This is from his 1952 diary. He referred to blacks as those magnificent examples of the African race who have maintained their racial purity thanks to their lack of an affinity with bathing, have seen their territory invaded by a new kind of slave, the Portuguese, and the two ancient races have now begun a hard life together. The black is indolent and a dreamer, spending his meager wage on frivolity or drink, while the European has a tradition of work and saving. We're going to do for the blacks exactly what blacks did for the revolution, by which I mean nothing. And